Hey everyone, looking at the Granberg edging mill today. It used to be called the mini mill. It's also known as the model G-555. You may have an Alaskan mill. Alaskan mills are great. They cut horizontal boards, planks, and they do a great job of that. But you also have the live edge left over. And depending on what you're planning on doing, whether you're making a live edge table or whatever, you may not necessarily need to edge it. But also, even for like a live edge project, sometimes it's helpful to, like say you wanted to make a double wide table out of something like this, you could edge just one side of it and then take another board and edge it and match them and connect those two together, and you'd have one wide piece instead of necessarily milling, you know, a super wide slab. But in this case, if you're wanting to make dimensional lumber, you can use an Alaskan mill by flipping the log around and various cuts to get the other edge straightened, using your first cut rails. But the edging mill is a more efficient way of doing it. As you can see, the edging mill is a very simple attachment that you attach to your saw. It essentially clamps right to your bar with these two bolts. They don't go through the bar, they just have a little hardened stub at the end that kind of digs in. Now, one thing about it, you need to have a solid bar, not a laminated bar, otherwise it will put indentations into your bar. But it just has essentially a guide rail, like a V rail, and they also supply these little V tracks. They're in 2-foot lengths, and you set up a guide board and create a straight line, and you attach these. They're 2 screws, and you just put them in a straight line. And then the edging mill, the V, just sets right on that. It's a very well-balanced system to do that. And an interesting thing about it is these particular bolts right here are actually ovalized inside this aluminum piece here, which allows you to set the straightness. Like, for instance, you can absolutely set up to be perfectly square in that sense. But let me also mention this. When it comes to your guide board, you can use, some people use maybe a 2x4, 2x6 on a regular piece of board. But I found it's very difficult to get good, consistent boards that stay nice and straight. So what I did was I went and bought a sheet of 4x8 plywood. And this particular plywood, it's 3-ply, and it's I think it's either 3/8 or 5/16 thickness. And I took the 4x8 sheet and cut it lengthwise. I ripped it into 4 equal segments, so they're just slightly less than 12 inches wide, and they would be 8 feet long. And so one of the 8 feet pieces, I cut them into 2-foot segments. Like, in other words, this is a 2-foot segment here, this is an 8-foot segment. Squirted a bunch of glue down, then the next segment, I put the 8-footer over top of that short piece, and I put the short 2-foot piece down here. And then for the third layer, put the 8-foot down here and the 2-foot piece here, and then just went through with a bunch of screws and screwed them all together. And essentially what you get is a really solid, rigid plank that is much more resistant to bowing and flexing and curving, assuming you can keep it out of the weather. And then what we have is the actual plank that I'll be milling here underneath the edge board, the guide board. And I just have it, the guide board, the edge board, just clamped onto it with clamps at each end. Or you can use screws. Sometimes I'll just run a screw right down into the board itself. So let me just show you how easy it is to use this. I've already warmed this saw up. Let me tell you something. This particular saw right here, I want to do another video some other time. The Echo 680. This is a fantastic saw for edging. One of the best features about this saw is how well it oils the bar. Not only does it have a very generous automatic oil supply, it also has the manual button that you can press that and it squirts additional oil onto your bar. Another super excellent feature is the air filtration system is really good, because that's one of the kind of the funny things about this edging mill. Depending on the wind, it kind of shoots it up in the air. If you really don't like sawdust, maybe it's not the best product, but that's just kind of one of the side effects of this thing. It shoots a lot of sawdust up, and consequently you want to have a saw that hopefully filters all that out. But open that up. Now keep in mind, there's no guard on this chainsaw, so you always have to be mindful of where that bar is. And you have to have this thing up off the ground. You can't be doing this thing down the ground and running your bar through the dirt, obviously. So in my case, a lot of times I just use a simple setup like this to elevate the board that you're working on up above. And I have it offset just enough so that it doesn't cut into my board here, or my rep. It has a handle that you can hold here, then you take your other hand and give it gas. So there you go. That's a 2-inch board, by the way. Let me take the clamps off here. I'm making a goat enclosure. We'll go over that one of these days here. All the different custom sizes we're milling up. That's what's so fun about being able to mill your own lumber. If you're building some kind of special project, you need some 4x4 posts. You need some, in this case, I'm using full 2-inch boards for the flooring. You can mill it whatever thickness you want. Now, the thing about having a good straight edge like this now, say you have a workshop, you have a wood shop, and you maybe you want to run this through a table saw, that would be an ideal thing. Now that you have a nice straight edge on here, you could set it on your table saw, run it through to whatever width you need it for. In my particular case, I'm just milling this stuff relatively green, and I'm building this goat enclosure, so I'm not overly picky about drying it right now. If I was, going to be drying it, I would take, more steps there. Let me flip this board around. And essentially what I do now, if I wanted to go ahead and just edge this, just see how much width I can get out of this board. I don't care if it has a little bit of wane to it, because with the flooring, I'll be putting that to the bottom side, so I just need kind of a relatively straight edge on top. So looking down the width of the board here, looks like I could pull, let's just cut it an even 8 inches. Just make 8-inch mark all down along here, and then just bring that edging mill. If you have a like a track saw for your circular saw, like Festool type, Craig type, that's kind of what this is, only your average like electrical circular saw maybe runs at 15 amps. What's that, maybe 2 horsepower or 3 horsepower at the most. you have a chainsaw mill like this, and you can, you're running at, you know, whatever your chainsaw is. If I used to use my Stihl 660, which is over 7 horsepower, but it's really overkill, you know, for edging small beams, or even if you were doing a big beam like a cant, like 8x8 or 10x10, you still don't really need, even for that application, a super big chainsaw. A saw like this particular one that I'm using here is a 67cc. It's got like, I think, mid 4 horsepower, between 4.5 5 horsepower, somewhere in that range, and it does great just milling. A nice thing too about the edging mill, because it's running vertically, it evacuates your sawdust chips a little bit more effectively than even the horizontal mills that are trying to, you know, fling it out the side. Gravity is to some extent pulling it out the bottom here. I happen to have a 24-inch bar on the saw. I wouldn't need that, obviously, that long a bar. Could go with a much shorter, right? You know, for just edging small stuff like this, maybe even like a 16. And, you know, anytime you can run a shorter bar, got a lot of sawdust on my face here. But anytime you can use a shorter bar, it effectively makes your saw a little bit more powerful, like because it doesn't have to pull as much rotational mass with the chain. Let me just go ahead and edge this real quick. Because I used a sheet of 4x8 plywood and made it into a 10-foot long guide rail, you can mill close to 10 feet long, because I like to have a little bit of a porch out here so that I can just rest the saw. You probably need about maybe that much, you know, not even a whole lot, just to start your cut. But keep in mind, you can mill much longer boards. This particular board right here is just under 14 feet long, and what I'll do with it is put a chalk line on it from end to end, and I'll strike a chalk line, and then I'll put the edging mill right on that line, cut it as far up as I can go, 10 feet or whatever, 9 feet, and then move it further up following the chalk line and continue right on. So using that method, you can just keep leapfrogging down a board whatever length that you've already milled it to. So it's a very effective technique. One thing I wanted to mention too, how I mentioned before, a lot of people just use like a 2x4 or a 2x6. This is almost 12 inches wide. It's like 11 3/4 or whatever. I find it to be very stable by having this extra mass in the width. And just wanted to go over that. The thing about the Granberg product, it's super simple, but yet the materials that they use are high quality. These are, you know, aircraft grade aluminum parts, stainless steel parts. The fasteners are hardened steel. It's good quality, and the thing is built straight. Even something as simple as this, if it's welded out of tolerance or whatever that creates an odd cut, then it's not going to be effective. That's why, from my experience, the Granberg Laskin mill and the edging mill, it seems like they have some quality control in their production, and it really shows because the product actually performs as stated. So just wanted to put that out there so that anybody that might be interested in a very simple tool, it can be used to actually cut boards as well. You can do quarter sawing, some various things. I primarily use it as an edging mill only because it's so effective for that application. Hey, you guys have a great day.